Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. We hear from the senior pastor of a church which was shut down by AHS for not adhering to public health restrictions. The action plan from the Lethbridge Police Service, requested by Justice Minister Casey Medu, is completed. We have the details. And a spokesperson with Canadians for Affordable Energy says the Liberals' net zero emissions by 2050 is an attack on humanity.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Grace Life Church in Spruce Grove, Alberta has been in the news quite a bit lately. Their church was shut down by Alberta Health Services for not adhering to the public health restrictions during the pandemic. Now, recently, a convoy of hundreds of people from across the province showed up to offer their support to Senior Pastor James Coates, his staff, and their congregation. Pastor Coates joins me now. Now, Pastor James, you spent just over a month in jail standing up for what you really believe in, that your church has the right to host full church services. What was that experience like behind bars for 35 days, and how were you treated?
We're standing for the Lordship of Christ over his church. So we don't believe that the government has the authority to dictate to the church the terms of worship. And that's fundamentally what we are standing for, is the right to be able to honor Christ as head and Lord over his church. As it relates to my time in prison, it was a mixed bag of different experiences, from immense joy and blessing to times of despair. And I was treated well in prison by the inmates. I was for the most part treated well by the guards as well. And so the overall experience was positive, but it was a challenge. There's no question.
Now, you're not the first believer, and you won't be the last put behind bars here. Did you have an opportunity to witness to any prisoners or guards while you were incarcerated?
It was difficult to connect with the guards just because they keep quite a bit of distance from the inmates, but I had lots of opportunity to share the gospel with the guards. And they would come to me and just ask me for help and share their lives and difficulties with me, and I would share the gospel with them. I was able to conduct a Bible study with a few of the guys on my tier, and so I had lots of opportunity to share the gospel.
Now, what are your thoughts on the government's current restrictions and how the AHS changed the locks on your church, put up fencing to keep you out?
Well, I think it's evident that the AHS is ultimately not even employing real science to oversee these lockdowns. It's basically superstition at this point in time. And they continue to double down, which is just painting them into a corner where it's going to make it very difficult for them to change course, and they need to change course. I mean, the data is in. States in the US are opening up, even California is opening up, and so it's going to be incredibly difficult for Alberta and Canada to keep this up. And so they need an off-ramp. I don't know what it's going to be. It's not likely to be the vaccine. Premier Kenney believes the vaccine is the savior. Prime Minister Trudeau doesn't, and so they need an off-ramp. They've pinned themselves into a corner, and I don't know how they're going to get out of this.
Now, neither you nor your congregation had anything to do with a recent rally at Grace Life Church, including those who tore down the fences?
We had a gathering at that time. We were together in an undisclosed location, worshiping our Lord, just like we always do and intend to. And so, no, we were not present for anything that took place at our facility. In fact, we have no control over that area. That is entirely governed now by the RCMP and AHS. And so they've taken it from us. It's functionally theirs at the moment. And so, no, we were not there that day.
So, Pastor James, what's next for you and Grace Life Church moving forward?
We need to continue to care for our people. We need to continue to shepherd the flock and tend to the spiritual needs of our people. And that's our primary goal and focus. That's what this is all about, is fulfilling our ministry to the people that have been entrusted to us. And so our responsibility as a leadership is to be focused on that task and be faithful to our Lord all the way until he should call us home or return.
Thanks so much for your time, Pastor James. Pastor James Coates is going to court to answer to the charge of breaking the public health restrictions on May the 3rd. The Lethbridge Police Service sent their recently drafted action plan off to Alberta's Justice Minister in the hopes that he won't dissolve the service altogether. Earlier this week, we reported the document was completed by LPS and the Police Commission ahead of Minister Casey Medew's April 16th deadline. Now, the plan was supposed to address several key areas of concern which have cast our police in a negative light. Jeanette Rocher has more on this story. Now, Jeanette, I guess the question is, will this new plan be enough to keep Minister Medew from taking some drastic measures on the LPS?
Well, Hal, the Justice Minister did give a strong warning that he could impose Section 30 of the Police Act, which means he potentially could dissolve the entire police service altogether if certain actions weren't met and certain concerns weren't addressed. Now, I did speak with the Police Commission Chair, Rob Van Spronson, today about this new action plan, and he remains fairly positive that it is a plan that does address much of the public concern, including ethics and accountability, leadership development, employee mental health, communication, and database access.
The biggest one, of course, is the ethics and the accountability piece, right? Because that's the piece that we feel is the most important. It's what led to the concerns in the first place, right? So dealing with ethics and accountability, making sure that there's due process, making sure that there's those officers who do breach professional conduct are held accountable. Part of the of our action plan too is looking at that database, right? And the police database, the niche system, just because those 5 people access it doesn't necessarily mean they did it inappropriately, because the system isn't designed to necessarily record a reason. And that's one of the things that we're going to change in that system, is that when you log on to it, you have to give a reason for why you're in there.
Now, according to Van Spronson, that document was only sent off to the Justice Minister late last night, so we are still waiting to hear his reaction on that plan. Hal?
Thanks so much, Jeanette. A summary of that action plan is available on our website and on our Facebook page. Maclean's magazine came out with its top communities in the country in which to live and work for this year. Coming in at number 9 is Brooks, Alberta. Brooks is the only city in southern Alberta to crack the top 10. Researchers base their results on incidents of crime, affordability, population growth, and internet accessibility. Brooks Mayor Barry Morishita says he's happy with the result, but knows how important broadband internet really is and hopes it'll improve for local residents.
We're exploring a couple of options right now, working with a consortium to bring fiber into the community, and then broadband service available to every resident and every business. And with high speeds, like gig speeds up and down, because that's what the new economy is going to require for people to be able to work from home, and for even the businesses. The technology and just the sheer amount of data that's required these days to run the new pieces of the economy are huge. And we're hoping that with this initiative that we'll be able to bring that to the city of Brooks sooner than later.
Of the 415 communities across the country, Maclean's ranked Edmonton in the number 5th spot and Lethbridge 133rd. The top-ranked city overall was Halifax, Nova Scotia. The province announced today that beginning April 19th, 10 physician clinics across Alberta will begin vaccinating patients at their clinics as part of a pilot project. Officials say depending upon the success of the program, they could expand to more clinics in May. 2 clinics in each AHS zone will be participating. The province says each clinic will receive 200 doses of the Moderna vaccine. As of April 12th, 970,000 doses of vaccine have been administered in Alberta. Midwifery has become increasingly popular here in southern Alberta, so much so that Lethbridge community midwives are keeping a wait list to meet the demand. During the pandemic, many women are choosing stay-at-home births. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly spoke with local midwives along with a new mom about her experience.
JOYLYNN BEUTLER gave birth just 5 days ago, and she beamed about the experience alongside a midwife.
So much choice and so much empowerment the whole way, and just so much education that you don't realize they have years and years and years of catching babies, and it was so beautiful.
Lethbridge community midwives serve all of southern Alberta, delivering 120 babies annually. The age-old practice gives local women an alternative to conventional care. In 2019, Chinook Regional Hospital expanded its services to include midwifery.
So just the numbers, the demand is gigantic.
With the pandemic forcing people indoors, 70% of Lethbridge community midwife births were at home.
Like, beautiful thing that so many moms have been like, oh, I want that and I wish I could have that too. And it's, well, you can. Like, we have this option. It's just like the worst kept secret.
And with many women on a waiting list,
Alberta needs many, many, many more midwives, and especially the South Zone. We have demand that we cannot even dream of meeting.
Look forward to serving the beautiful women that we have in this area that we've just come to grow. Like, we just love them.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The City of Lethbridge is looking for your input. An online capital budget tool has been launched that will allow residents to explore and learn more about proposed capital projects. Participants can also make comments on specific projects. The Capital Improvement Program identifies required projects our city needs and provides a planning schedule and financing plan. The City of Lethbridge is looking at which projects need prioritizing over the next 10 years. The online capital budget allocator tool will be available on the city's website until April the 28th. My City Care in Lethbridge is putting on the Cinderella Project and Tuck Shop for students who are graduating but might not be able to afford the cost of a special suit or dress. As Micah Quinn explains now, students will be transported into a room where their graduation dreams will come true.
When students walk into the Cinderella Project and Tuck Shop, they'll notice rows upon rows of dresses, shoes, and accessories for the ladies, and suits, tuxes, and dress shoes for the men. This is the 5th year that My City Care has run the program.
So what kind of happens is students will set up for an appointment, and we kind of give them as best as we can to kind of facilitate a boutique kind of shopping experience. They come in, they have somebody who helps them basically select dresses, or if they would like a suit or a tux, we help them find those things. And then if they need things like alterations, even hair and makeup appointments, photography sessions, and that kind of stuff is all included as a part of the program. So if there's families that can't afford or are struggling through the season, they're more than welcome to register.
Even though graduation ceremonies are up in the air due to the pandemic, Triple is encouraging families to still register.
Because even if things do get canceled, you're still going to have those memories and you're still going to be able to go out and celebrate as a family.
All of the graduation clothing is donated by members of the community in Lethbridge, and the program is looking for extra donations.
Definitely could use men's shirts, we could definitely use men's dress shoes, but even if you do happen to have anything lying around, we accept jewelry, accessories, shoes, gowns, shirts, belts, ties, anything like that we'd be happy to have.
Fulden says that volunteers are needed to help out, and the program can always use them.
Whether it's moving things around, if it's involved in the appointments, if it's helping with setting up, steaming.
For more information on the Cinderella Project and Tuck Shop, or to register, interested residents can visit myvictory.ca/mycitycare. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Lethbridge is participating in its first City Nature Challenge. Residents can download the iNaturalist app and then document the nature they find by taking a picture and sharing it. The Resource Development Coordinator for the Helen Schuler Nature Center, Curtis Goodman, says this is a great way to get outdoors and explore the vast beauty in our city.
So the City Nature Challenge is a global BioBlitz. And a BioBlitz is an effort where people go out into nature and they track and observe everything that they see that's living. Whether that's plants, whether that's animals, whether that's insects, just interesting living things outside. By submitting that through the iNaturalist platform, we can start to create a massive inventory of living things that are found here, and it can help build understanding of the state of biodiversity locally and how that compares globally in different areas.
The City Nature Challenge will run in Lethbridge from April 30th to May 3rd. Recent stats show that Canadian CO2 emissions have dropped 2% over the last 14 years. Now it needs to fall 28% more over the next 9 years to meet the federal Liberal government's commitment. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his party are now pushing for a net zero emission by the year 2050. Dan McTeague, who is the president for the Canadians for Affordable Energy, says this will guarantee poverty and a war on humanity itself.
Well, you can't really come up with any better way of describing this. And let me, Hal, just preface that by saying that the 2% drop was in fact only because the federal government fiddled with the numbers from 2018 and 2017 to make it look like the emissions from that period of time were much higher to give themselves that 2% cushion. we still have to, and I'm going to take it that that is accurate. We still need to achieve, a ninefold, call it what it is, a 19-fold increase in order to make that 2030 commitment that we made at Paris viable. So if you're not going to be able to achieve the objective today or in 9 years, much less the next 21 to 29 years, how is it possible to set these targets when you know that they are both impossible and extraordinarily costly? And in that context, destruction to the Canadian energy sector, destruction to the Canadian farm sector, destruction to the Canadian manufacturer sector. This is pie in the sky stuff, and Canada had best understand we've done a great job on clean energy. This is not the way to go about it.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada's following COVID-19 developments in the United States, where officials have put pause on using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine after 6 women developed blood clots. He says, however, our country is still on track to receive its first shipment from the manufacturer by the end of the month.
Obviously, we're following closely developments in the United States, and we can assure everyone that Health Canada will, every step of the way, put the health of Canadians first and foremost in any decisions we make around distributing vaccines. But it also goes to highlight that it was important that we signed deals with a large range of potential vaccine makers because we didn't know which ones would be most effective, which ones would arrive early. That's why Canadians are well served, and even without the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, we are going to be receiving over 44 million doses by the end of June.
Canadian health officials say a rare blood clotting syndrome that may be linked to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine will still be authorized in Canada. The news comes a day after Canada reported its first case of a blood clot from a woman in Quebec who received the vaccine.
Health Canada still considers the benefits of the AstraZeneca vaccine to outweigh the risks of getting COVID-19. And we are not limiting the use of the vaccine to any specific age group or sex. Because all the authorized vaccines have been shown to be very effective at preventing hospitalizations and deaths, we continue to encourage you to get the first vaccine that is offered to you.
There's a video circulating on social media which has gone viral. It shows Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland saying that COVID-19 is an opportunity. Now, that comment did not sit well with our political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley.
Chrystia Freeland was talking about building a national childcare program and said COVID has presented a window of political opportunity. Say that to the families of the 23,000 people who have died from COVID-19. Say that to the more than 700,000 Canadians who are still unemployed due to this pandemic, or the more than 2 million who saw their wages or hours cut dramatically at some point during this pandemic. Tell that to the business owners, the tens of thousands of businesses that are hurting or will never come back. This is not a political opportunity. This is a pandemic.
Mr. Lilley will also have details on why the Trudeau Liberals shut down a committee investigation into sexual misconduct in our military. That's coming up later in our newscast. Federal NDP leader JAGMEET SINGH is calling on the Prime Minister to commit to a national childcare program and more funding to fight the COVID-19 pandemic ahead of next week's budget. Singh has already pledged not to trigger an election, potentially weakening the NDP's leverage.
There's 2 things that Justin Trudeau can do right now that would help people and alleviate some of the pressures that people are feeling. First off, we need to get everyone in this country vaccinated. So we need the federal government to play a more active role in the actual vaccination. We need an all-hands-on-deck approach. It's not enough to just sit on the sidelines. There has to be an active participation of the federal government in getting everyone vaccinated. Secondly, we know one of the most important tools to fighting the spread of COVID-19 is paid sick leave. And we've been calling for improving the current program offered. It is just not good enough. We've heard from experts we need to make paid sick leave better so that workers can no longer make the impossible choice of going into work sick or staying at home, not knowing if they'll have enough money at the end of the month to make their bills.
The Saskatchewan government is tightening restrictions on group sizes and how many can attend worship services across the province. Health Minister Paul Merriman says the level of transmission remains too high in many parts of his province. Effective immediately, only people living under the same roof are to be present in a home. As of Friday, church gatherings will be restricted to no more than 30 people.
We had hoped to avoid reinstating these restrictions, but it's something we need to do for just a few more weeks until we can get some more people vaccinated. Effective immediately, all private indoor gatherings are restricted to immediate household members only, with limited exceptions for co-parenting arrangements, caregivers, and service people. Maximum capacity at places of worship will be reduced to 30 people effective this Friday. Again, these new measures will apply to the entire province.
The new measures will be in place until April 26th, pending a review. Manitobans had the chance to ask some of the province's top health officials questions in regards to Manitoba's COVID-19 response. One of the main questions from the phone-in town hall meeting on Tuesday night was, when will the province return to normal? Dr. Brent ROUSSIN, who's the Manitoba Chief Provincial Health Officer, says the focus right now is getting vaccine doses into as many arms as possible. He assured people that all pandemics end, but it is still too soon to lift any public health restrictions.
We want to ensure that people understand that vaccination is very beneficial, not only to yourself, but to the people around you. We want to encourage all Manitobans to be vaccinated as soon as you become eligible, because we really are going to rely on large vaccine uptake to try to get back to normal or to some sense of normal earlier. And so we do have certain things in our public health follow-up right now that right now it's fully vaccinated people, so with 2 doses they may not be required to isolate. We don't have that in place right now for return travelers, but it's something that can be reviewed over time. But right now our focus is we need as many Manitobans as possible to get vaccinated as soon as possible, and the higher proportion of Manitobans that get vaccinated, the much more likely we can loosen restrictions.
A police officer in Minnesota who shot and killed a black man after a traffic stop has been arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter. Kim Potter, who resigned as a Brooklyn Center police officer this week, is charged following Sunday's shooting death of 20-year-old Dante Wright. In Minnesota, second-degree manslaughter applies when authorities allege a person causes someone's death by culpable negligence. Potter could face up to 10 years in prison and/or a $20,000 fine. Well, we had a mixture of sun and cloud today in Lethbridge, but not that warm. The mercury, however, should be climbing beginning on Thursday and into the weekend. Full weather details are coming up. You know, the record high for this day was 26 degrees way back in 1963. Could you imagine that for this time of year? That would be nice. Jeanette Rocher is here now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we didn't quite reach 26 today, but things should be warming up nicely as we get closer to the weekend.
Well, that's true. In fact, we'll be looking ahead to a lovely 21 degrees on a Saturday. I wish I could say that we are in for some record-breaking weather. Not quite the case, but it's going to be lovely just the same. Into tomorrow, Thursday, mix of sun and cloud, a high of 12 degrees, looking at a wind of 20 kilometers per hour. Into Friday, lots of sunshine, 17 the high. There's that 21 degrees for Saturday with sunny skies. 60% chance of showers, though, on a Sunday with quite a drastic drop in temperature, actually, down to 7 degrees on Sunday. And then guess what? Overnight, Sunday night, 30% chance of flurries. I say what? I guess it's April, right? Into Monday, 10 degrees, mix of sun and cloud, and 15 on Tuesday. So again, we're doing that roller coaster effect. What can I say? It is April. Average high for this time of year, 13. Average low, -1. 26 was our high temperature back in 1963. And in 1986, we had our lowest, which was -12. 6:41 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset bedtime will be at 8:22 p.m. this evening. Over on the West Coast, not a bad day over in Victoria. High of 19 degrees, beautiful. A little bit cooler by the water though, sunshine. Sunny also in Vancouver, high of 17. A little bit windy by the water there. Sunshine across the rest of Alberta today, or tomorrow rather. 16 degrees, the high in Edmonton, 13 in Calgary. Winds of about 15 kilometers per hour, not too bad at all. Most of the rest of the prairies, not bad either. 13 degrees, the high in Saskatoon. Regina is where we're going to see a 30% chance of flurries tomorrow with a high of 4. High of 4 also in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and cloud and a 15 kilometer per hour wind. Over in central Canada, this is where we're going to see some periods of rain in Toronto tomorrow. 10 degrees the high, 11 degrees the high in Ottawa tomorrow with a chance of rain. and showers beginning late in the morning tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 10 degrees. Over on the east coast in Fredericton, sunshine, 12 degrees. Same thing for Halifax. Charlottetown, lots of sunshine as well, 7 degrees the high, and 1 degree the high tomorrow in St. John's with a chance of snow and winds as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
A new survey has found support among business executives for COVID-19 related restrictions has dropped sharply from last year. Modus Research says only 38% of more than 900 managers surveyed last month supported tighter restraints. That is down from 54% last fall. Support for looser rules went up from 26% in October to 39% last month. Modus says support for easing restraints was highest in Alberta at 55%, while Ontario had the most support for tighter restrictions at 44%. The word E. coli can oftentimes have a negative connotation, especially when you hear about E. coli in our food. Now, there's a research associate at the University of Lethbridge who says there's good and bad E. coli. Dr. Kim Stanford is studying the effects of E. coli on humans. She says what they're discovering is that it can be found in a wide range of livestock.
Alberta has been quite unique in that there have been several recent outbreaks of pathogenic E. coli associated with pigs in the province. So this study is to try to determine, okay, are the pigs just picking up pathogenic E. coli from being around cattle, or has a certain strain of this pathogenic E. coli become adapted pigs and can just now live in pigs?
Catch the full interview with Dr. Kim Stanford from the U of L and Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. McDonald's will be mandating worker training to combat harassment, discrimination, and violence in its restaurants around the world. The restaurant chain says the new worker sensitivity training will begin next year.
What we're trying to do here is to provide both current employees as well as prospective employees the confidence that when they walk into a McDonald's restaurant, they know that they're going to be protected. This would be something that you would get onboarded with as training coming into the system. You know, when you take it sort of that everybody sort of understands the values, well, that's not true. And we've got to make sure as leadership that we're continuing to set the expectations, both so that people know, is this a company I want to be a part of, but also to be very clear about what the expectations are.
Great, now I'm hungry, thanks so much. Now here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 32 points on the day to finish at 19,172. The Dow was up 53 points to 33,731. The S&P 500 was down 16 points to 4125, and the Nasdaq was down 138 points on the day to 13,858. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 260 to 62.78 US per barrel. Natural gas was unchanged at 262 US. Gold was up 5 cents to 1736.49 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 25.42 US an ounce. Wheat is at $315 per metric ton, barley's at $325, canola's at $837, and corn is at $355 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 30 cents to 122.10, feeder cattle were down $1.30 to 141.15, and lean hogs were up 20 cents to 103.60. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.88 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the province announced today that beginning April 19th, 10 physician clinics across Alberta will begin vaccinating patients at their clinics as part of a pilot project. Officials say depending upon the success of the project, the program could expand to more clinics in May. 2 clinics in each AHS zone will be participating. There's a video circulating on social media where Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland refers to COVID-19 as an opportunity. That has naturally upset many, including political reporter Brian Lilly, who will have details for us in just a moment. As you've heard on Bridge City News, Johnson & Johnson has pulled its COVID-19 vaccine from the United States and Australia. To discuss this in a little more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly. Brian, has Canada also decided to yank the vaccine? I understand millions of doses were expected to begin arriving in May.
At this point, no. And in fact, the government says they are aware of the concerns. They do continue to monitor it. Health Canada put out a statement on Tuesday saying that they had received more information on the Johnson & Johnson, or it's sometimes referred to by Janssen. That's the company that makes it, owned by Johnson & Johnson. So just so that everyone knows, there are multiple names for it. This was a vaccine that an awful lot of people were excited for because it had one shot. Unlike all the others, one shot. More traditional style of vaccine. You didn't need a two-dose. You didn't need really deep freeze. This could have been a game changer. It's being pulled for the same reason that some people have questions about AstraZeneca, and that being blood clots. Now, we have to keep in mind that we're talking about millions of doses of this vaccine have been given out, and there have been about 7 incidents of blood clots, including one person who died. That is a 1 in a million chance of this happening. So very low. And like AstraZeneca and the concern over blood clots, this is something that there are prescription drugs that we take all the time that have a much higher probability of giving you blood clots, especially women, than this vaccine. But people are being so cautious. The United States, though, and I heard Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN talking about this the other day. He was asked, well, isn't this vaccine safe compared to all these other things? And he said, yes, it is. But because we have so much Pfizer and so much Moderna, we don't need this one. Sadly, in Canada, that's not the position that we're in.
The first case of a rare blood clot from the AstraZeneca vaccine has been discovered in Canada, involving a woman from Quebec who's recovering at home. Brian, first we heard of the blood clots in Europe, and now they've made their way to our country. This may be something that's making Canadians a little nervous or maybe hesitant of getting their COVID-19 vaccine shots.
Yeah, well, when you've got both Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca having the same problem, yes. And when you've got very little context, I mean, I just gave you the context about how, widely used prescriptions, like the birth control pill, far more likely to cause blood clots than either of Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca. That context isn't put out there. And so people hear blood clots and they think, oh, it's not safe. You know what's more likely to give you blood clots than either of these vaccines? COVID. One of the outcomes of COVID-19 is blood clots. So the vaccines, both AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, are far safer than catching the virus, but it will make people hesitant. I have heard from countless people already that they will not take it. We've seen governments, the federal government, for a while, we had both Health Canada and NACI, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, arguing over which age group AstraZeneca was safe for. All of these things, I think, will develop and feed into vaccine hesitancy, which was already an issue to begin with when it comes to COVID vaccines.
Now, apparently there's still more delays when it comes to actually receiving some of these COVID-19 vaccines, specifically from Moderna. What's the latest?
So Moderna, and this is not a federal government issue, this is the company issue, but the feds do have to wear this to a degree because it's their responsibility to get it, it's the province's responsibility to administer it, and Moderna's been having trouble meeting their deliveries for the last little while. You'll remember at the end of March, they were supposed to deliver their last big tranche of vaccines, and they ended up putting it off until I think April 1st or 2nd for doses that had been expected more than a week before that. Well, now doses that were supposed to show up on April 5th have just arrived in Canada and are now being distributed to the provinces. The doses that are supposed to show up on April 19th have now been put off to April 29th. Now, when asked about this, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did himself no favors because he said, well, sometimes deliveries are delayed by a day or two. No, we're talking a week to 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks. That's a significant delay. Manitoba has had to reschedule people. Ontario had opened up some clinics. I think we discussed it last time at Canada's Wonderland, the big amusement park. They had to shut those down because those were specifically for Moderna. Nova Scotia's had to change its plans. Each of the provinces is having to adjust because they're significant shipments, and it's a good vaccine, but it is showing up late. And that just delays everyone's plans. And so, whether it's Alberta or British Columbia or, Saskatchewan, everyone's dealing with this at the moment.
Now, the variants have been making their presence felt in Canada, Brian. Our country has now surpassed the United States in terms of COVID cases per capita.
Yeah, this is something that has not happened yet, and it happened, depending on how you measure, Monday or Tuesday of this week. And on a per capita basis, we now have more COVID-19 cases than the United States. Yeah, none of this is good news. The Trudeau government was always able to say, oh, look south of the border, look how bad things are down in the United States. Well, even in places where they've opened back up, COVID cases on a per capita basis are like places like Texas. They are lower than we are here. Other jurisdictions in the United States are still in lockdown or facing certain types of restrictions, and in some areas they're putting them back in. But on a per capita basis, lower COVID-19 case counts than we have. This is a bad sign, and you're right, it is being fueled by variants. Here in Ontario, it tends to be the UK variant. In British Columbia, it's the Brazilian variant. And I forget the one, I think it's the Brazilian variant that you're mainly dealing with in Alberta as well. So it depends on where you are. And the only place that seems to be getting off scot-free is Atlantic Canada. Still no international flights into that area, and still tight travel restrictions if you go into the area.
Brian, CNN has apparently ripped Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a new one on our vaccine rollout, and Trudeau shot back with, we need to focus more on the facts. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this was a bit bizarre. The Americans don't normally pay an awful lot of attention to what goes on north of the border, but CNN does have a reporter based here called Paula Newton. Used to be a Canadian broadcast journalist. She's worked for the CNN and different American outlets for some time now. She did a report on our slow vaccine rollout. The Wall Street Journal had a piece in the weekend on this very same issue. And Jake Tapper, on his show The Lead on CNN, took the Canadian government, specifically Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, to task. When asked about it by Conservative leader Erin O'Toole during question period, Justin Trudeau's answer was, about sticking to the facts. Jake Tapper heard about this and tweeted back saying, what fact was wrong in this report? Canada's a great country, he said, but it's got bad leadership on the vaccine front. I can't say he's wrong, but it wouldn't be wise, considering that, probably more Canadians will watch CNN than they'll watch CBC's The National. Wouldn't be wise for Justin Trudeau to start picking a fight with this guy.
Brian, there have been calls to put in more restrictions from variant hotspots, including Brazil and India. But this week, our Prime Minister said, no chance.
Yeah, this is frustrating because, they will resist common sense solutions, such as putting quarantine orders in place for incoming travelers. They resisted that. They resisted increased screening early on. They resisted testing when that became an issue towards the end of 2020. They resisted stopping flights from hotspots until the UK variant was already in Canada. They didn't want to do that. Now Brazil and India are both sources of flights to Canada. They're both hotspots. They both have variants. We're worried about the variant in India. It's called a double mutant variant. It is the reason that country has seen a dramatic spike in COVID-19 cases. So we're concerned about that. But when asked about further travel restrictions, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just said, no, we don't need to do it. And we've got the most robust. I'm sorry, we simply don't. There are ways that we can improve it that don't necessarily include this $2,000 COVID hotel stay for 3 days, which is probably unconstitutional. There are common sense solutions, but he seems to resist them until it's too late. Of course, during that same news conference on Tuesday, he also said that when asked, would you have done anything differently? Did you make any mistakes? He said no.
It's interesting. I've been chatting with John Carpe, the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and he talked to me about those quarantine hotels, and I believe they have 11 clients now that are suing, that had to pay out, like you said, $2,000. They came back healthy, safe, but yeah, he's got 11 clients and growing when it comes to Canadians who are tucked away in these quarantine hotels, these federal facilities. Brian, a video which went viral recently shows Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland calling COVID an opportunity while discussing a national childcare program at the Liberal Convention. And that did not sit well with many people.
No, it seems rather cold and calculating, but in some ways it's par for the course for this government, which has long viewed the pandemic as an opportunity for a reset, a great reset, to build back better. Use whatever buzz term you want, Hal. Chrystia Freeland was talking about building a national childcare program and said COVID has presented a window of political opportunity. Say that to the families of the 23,000 people who have died from COVID-19.
Yeah, wow.
Say that to the more than 700,000 Canadians who are still unemployed due to this pandemic, or the more than 2 million who saw their wages or hours cut dramatically at some point during this pandemic. Tell that to the business owners, the tens of thousands of businesses that are hurting or will never come back. This is not a political opportunity. This is a pandemic, and you should be focused on it, Minister Freeland. But instead, they're focused on building back better, which to them just means we've got cover to put in things that we want to do that may not sit well with the public. So they want to bring in all kinds of national social programs. So in this case, they were talking about national daycare. Government-run daycare is consistently the least preferred option when parents of children under the age of 6 are polled. When they're asked, their most common, or the most popular answer is they'd like to find a way to stay at home. If not, they'd like a family member to look after their child. Following that, a neighborhood daycare center like the lady down the street. Government-run centers are the least popular option except among a certain politically motivated group. And that's what they were talking about here. So shame on the Trudeau government, but this has been something that they have come back to time and again.
Now, still with the Liberals, they've long claimed to be a feminist government. So, Brian, let me ask you something. Why then did they shut down a committee investigation into sexual misconduct in the armed forces?
Because they could, and because it was embarrassing for them. They did have an assist from the Bloc Québécois. This was the National Defense Committee at the House of Commons. The Status of Women Committee is also reviewing the same issue of misconduct in the military and whether the government knew about it at the time. They've continued to give vague and strange answers on this. And so on Monday, they had a committee meeting, and I was watching the beginning of it and then just listening in as I was, working. The Liberals filibustered for about 90 minutes while their guests or their witnesses sat there. And then they tried to rush the witnesses through, and then at the end put up a motion calling for the study to be shut down. The Bloc voted with it and just ended this. So rather than continue to try and get to the bottom of what the government knew and when they knew it, they shut it down. As they did with SNC-Lavalin, as they did with WE, this is not a government that likes to be investigated, that likes the truth to come out.
Under the microscope. But that's what happens when you become a politician and you're in government here. Brian, we only have about a minute left here. Despite all of the troubles facing the Trudeau Liberals, several polls say that they would potentially win an election if one was held today. Do you think we may see a spring election?
I have been on Team Spring Election for quite some time, and I thought that they were going to bring in a budget, then say we need to build back better, and that we need a mandate to do it. With the rising COVID cases, I don't see it happening. But if these polls continue to show a big lead for them, it's going to be very, very tempting for the Liberals to do it. I know there's still back and forth in PMO and at party headquarters. We'll see who wins in a couple of weeks. The budget's next week, and we'll get a sense after that which direction they may be heading. But rising COVID numbers probably making them pause.
What do you mean, a big lead so we would see a majority government, not another minority?
Well, if they think that they could get a majority government because the polls showing them having a big lead, then that might tempt them to say, you know what, forget the rising COVID numbers, let's go to the polls, let's get that majority. But I'm not sure that right now, while much of the country is under tight restrictions, that they want an election going on.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Most of us are aware of the potential dangers of E. coli, but we probably don't know much more than that. Today, we are going to learn a bit more about this from someone who is researching for better ways to protect us from this. Joining me today from Lethbridge is Dr. Kim Stanford, a research associate at the University of Lethbridge. Kim, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So first of all, congratulations on receiving the funding for your research from Alberta's new Results-Driven Agricultural Research, or ARDAR. That fund, which is wonderful. How long will this enable you to continue your studies?
This is for 2 years of funding, and it will let me complete some projects that are already in progress from when I worked with Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. So it's fantastic. Like they're ready. Like they've had to be postponed a little bit with all of the changes, but this will let us finish these quite a number of projects off.
Excellent. Now, can you explain what exactly E. coli is and why it can be harmful for humans?
E. coli are bacteria, and we have E. coli in our digestive tracts. All mammals do, and we need them. So most of them are really good, but there are a few of them that have some other virulence factors that can make us really sick. So there's just a few bad ones. Most of them, we need them. The bad E. coli, the pathogenic type, they make humans very sick, but cattle are not sick. So cattle can carry these quite without really being any way to tell. And then from cattle feces getting into the water or into food, then that can lead to people becoming very, very ill and possibly dying.
Right, so your research is obviously very important. Now, I understand that your research also involves investigating cattle feed and other foodborne pathogens to improve the detection and control of pathogenic E. coli. So can you explain this? Is there E. coli present in cattle feed?
No, generally there's not. Some of the research that was funded was on feedborne pathogens, and that would be ergot. So ergot is a fungus that grows in cereal grains, and that can make cattle very sick. It can make humans very sick as well, but grain for human consumption would be cleaned of ergot, and that sort of the cleanings, the screenings, things like that would then be directed to cattle feed. So there's more ergot growing all the time, and so there's more ergot contaminated grain. So the work there is to try to figure out simple ways to make the ergot less toxic, or how much even can be fed to cattle before they cause us some problems.
So what can ergot do? What kind of problems can it present in cattle?
Oh, it has a wide variety of effects, which can make it quite difficult to diagnose that it's actually an ergot problem. But one of the main things it does is cause blood vessels to constrict, which can reduce blood flow to the extremities, so like the tips of the ears or the tail or the hooves in cattle, and that can cause gangrene and necrosis. So the whole hoof can slough off, which is really horrible, or they can have like very small ears, or like the tail is broken off. So it can cause them considerable pain. It can also do things like cause what looks like pneumonia, but really isn't. So it can get into the lungs. It can affect reproductively, where cows won't produce any milk at all, like zero milk production after they've had a calf. It can reduce the cattle won't eat the feed. They'll say, "Oh, I'm not going to eat this stuff." So then reduce growth rate, and it can, if bad enough, it can kill them too. If they get high enough doses of ergot, it can cause death.
Yeah, it sounds like a very serious problem. So how does this ergot even get into the cattle feed, and what exactly is ergot?
Well, it's a fungus that is producing, and the fungus comes through the air and goes when like barley or rye grain. Rye is particularly vulnerable to ergot. When it's flowering, then if the fungus is passed through on the air, it gets into the flowering grain, and instead of producing a kernel of grain, it'll produce this purplish black, looks kind of like a piece of grain, but it's actually a ball of fungus, and that's an ergot body. So when it produces that, then the ergot body contains some alkaloid poisons that then can lead to the bad effects to cattle or people if we were to consume ergot, which used to happen before we got like increased food safety and grain processing. That used to happen more frequently probably than we wanted to.
So through your research, are you finding some promising methods of reducing ergot in cattle feed then?
Well, we're just trying to find, first of all, how much ergot is safe to feed cattle before they will start showing any sort of negative effects to their growth or welfare. Like we want the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they have legislation of how much ergot can be in feed for cattle. In Canada, they have this regulations, and they're currently reevaluating them, because some of these, the regulations, I'm not quite sure how they developed their present regulations. I don't think there were a lot of scientific studies that they could even draw upon. So So we're doing a series of studies to try to better define what the allowable limit for ergot in feed should be. And then the other aspect that we're working on is to try to be able to detoxify the ergot just with some simple processing treatments that the feed industry could use. So we're looking at things like heating the grain, or pelleting, or heating and pelleting, and with those different combinations, looking at alkaloid concentrations after these treatments have been done to see if it's possibly making reducing the alkaloid concentrations and making the feed less toxic. That's the hope. But we'll be doing the animal feeding study for this ergot trial will be in the early, like late summer is when we're planning to start that. So that's still coming. We've just been doing the heating and the pelleting and finding different sources of ergot from here in Alberta or in Saskatchewan. We've also got some other ergot samples, and then trying to find really very different ones so that we could try the heating and pelleting and see what happened then to the grain.
Interesting. Now, Dr. Stanford, another project I understand that you're working on alongside of Alberta Health Services is looking at the relationship between human disease and persistence in the environment of pathogenic E. coli shed by cattle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, cattle can carry. They have a really diverse population of E. coli in their guts. They're like really a lot of different kinds. But the kinds of pathogenic E. coli that cause human disease are really much more narrow. There's only a few that when people get sick, it's only a very much more limited group. And so with this study, we're trying to be able to better predict when the E. coli that are being carried by the cattle are going to cause problems with humans, because right now there are some fairly standard tests that are done on to say, okay, this looks like a pathogenic E. coli, but still that's not a really good prediction if they're going to make people really make them ill. So we're hoping from this to be able to look at there's some other researchers in Germany that are part of this study, and they have found some information where if they can find isolates of E. coli that from cattle that really persist in the environment, like they stick around for a long time, that those ones are in Germany are the ones that they think are more likely to cause human disease. But they were looking at different types of E. coli, and it's very much the pathogens are very much related to the location. It's very location specific. So the work in Germany, we may not find the same thing here at all, because there's different evolution going on, and even just different groups of pathogenic E. coli present at different locations. In another study we did, we were looking for some different groups of pathogenic E. coli, and one type was very rare. We could only find it in cattle that were coming from moose jaw. So moose jaw was a hotbed of this one type that was a well-known pathogenic type of E. coli, but we had a hard time finding it from samples anywhere else, from all over Alberta or anywhere else. So it's very location related, which makes it complicated.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that at all. Now, Dr. Stanford, when we think of E. coli, we normally think of cows, right? But I'm told that pigs can also get it, and this can present a challenge for farmers who raise both hogs and cattle in close proximity.
Well, pigs, normally when they get the pathogenic types of E. coli, normally the pigs get sick. Like quite often they get sick themselves. They're more like humans. But this Alberta has been quite unique in that there have been several recent outbreaks of pathogenic E. coli associated with pigs in the province. So this study is to try to determine, okay, are the pigs just picking up pathogenic E. coli from being around cattle, or has a certain strain of this pathogenic E. coli become adapted to pigs and can just now live in pigs, and it's nothing to do with cattle at all? So that's the goal of this study, because if you don't really know what is causing the problem, if you think, okay, maybe it's cross-contamination because cattle and pigs are being slaughtered together at the same slaughter plant, so maybe it's cross-contamination. You don't really know that it's coming from the cattle or it's coming from the pigs. It makes it really much more difficult to try to control. So that's the whole point. Well, major point of this study is to try to figure out, is it adapted to pigs or coming from cattle?
Okay, now can you tell us about the new podcast that you're going to be co-hosting?
Okay, yes, that's we're looking at sharing some science-based information on issues facing the cattle industry. And so the title of our podcast is Cows on the Planet. And we'll, well, it's all, there are cattle here, and how are they affecting the planet? And we want to be, I'll be one of the co-hosts, and we will be interviewing various other scientists that are experts in particular areas, or other groups of specialists, like people like from Ducks Unlimited or World Wildlife Fund, people like that. We've got a whole whackload of podcast plan. It's a little bit daunting, even like I've never done anything like this before, so it's a little bit scary to jump in this and get going. But I've talked to some other agriculturally themed podcasters, and they say, okay, yeah, you just got to get in there and get going. And your first podcast is probably not going to be your best, but you learn to do by just getting in there and trying it. So,
I wish you all the best with that. Cows on the planet. We will have to look out for that one. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Kim Stanford.
Oh, well, thanks for asking about my work. It's always fun to talk about.
Dr. Kim Stanford is a research associate at the University of Lethbridge. And I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.